all doing? Can you hear me? Yes, I believe this is working. Forgot to put my glasses on. They have a smudge on them. I'm really on top of things. Definitely remember how to stream after taking a month off. Definitely took a month off due to all the crazy personal stuff that I have to deal with, and not just to play The Legend of Zelda. But, you know, that's a good game. I have no way to stream Switch games, which is a shame because I would kind of enjoy streaming that. Yes, I'm back, and I'm back with the very last of my rose hip tea. So we must put it to good use and see how far we can get into our investigation into the many mysteries of Lynbarrow Tor Abbey, such as who's fucking who? Why did everyone end up here? Is there really ghost shit going on? And also there's maybe a murder or something. Who knows? My cat is crying. I know you can't hear him, but I just feel the need to point that out because I will occasionally just be looking at the ground. And that's because there's a man who lives down there. That's really hot. Shit. Where'd it go? I have a black cat and a very dark room. So sometimes he will just appear places. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed my new intro screen. I bought the soundtrack to Misericorde on Steam, as I recommend you all do, because the music is one of the best parts of this game. I love it every time. I haven't sat down and listened to the entire soundtrack though, because I don't want to be spoiled for like the songs. I want them to like pop up and take me by surprise as they happen. So I've just got that whole playlist of the soundtrack shuffled underneath the the promo screen that I have, and you can hear that and enjoy some fun tunes while you wait for me to make tea. But I can't hear it, so whatever you were listening to, I hope you enjoyed it. I have no idea what it was. Sorry. Trying to make myself look less. It makes me look more like a ghost, actually. It's winter here now, so it's just a lot less light in general. Like I have my overheads on, I have my ring light on, but because I only have like a window on this side, I have to have the curtains drawn that side. Because otherwise I look like Two-Face. And so I just my options are to either be in complete shadow or look like an absolute wraith, and this is too bright actually. I've decided I can't look at it. Okay, I have to open the damn game that I want to play. That's important. Every time I do this, I'm like, I've done it wrong somehow and it's not going to show up. Anyway, I'm looking at the Steam page, and we've only got 10 of 17 achievements, and it seems we get an achievement every time we finish a chapter. So we're like still really only like halfway through this game, although the chapters have been of varying length. Fucking tunes. There's still like a lot more of this game we have left to explore. We haven't finished a chapter in a while, though, I don't think. Pat my cat. Because last time, 2 streams ago, we finished mid-scene, in the middle of the Misericorde itself. And then last stream, fully a month ago, we left the Misericorde, and then more stuff happened after that. Just like a little bit. what was I going to say? But there was still no end of the chapter. Like, we still weren't done with that segment of the story yet. So, but I remember some other streams we would, like, churn for 2 chapters, 3 chapters even. In a single stream, so... I don't know if being in chapter 10 of 17 means we're still halfway through the game, or if it means that we're very close to the end and there's just one big chapter we have to get through and then a bunch of little ones. I don't know. But this is the last of my rosehip tea, so... Either way, we're churning through the game one way or another. Yeah, that opening kind of catches me off guard because there's like weird distant shouting mixed in at the end of that song. I like it, but it makes me think that there's like, I don't know, someone in my house or just outside my house yelling at me or something, and I'm like, what's going on? So what do we think? Who do we think is that holding the sword there? Is that Catherine? Like, Catherine II, the dead girl? Because she doesn't look too distinguishably like any of the other nuns, I don't think. Hey, Jules. Oh, sorry. Hi, Mario. How's it going? As opposed to Luigi, okay. So, we're back. Right. Previous... I never know what to call it. The previous stream. The previous chunk of the game that I played. 2 streams ago, we left off mid-scene in the Misericorde. The last stream, we returned to the Misericorde. And, there's chess. A dealer yells at people for playing chess the way that I play chess, which was very embarrassing. Flora had got really drunk and had a bit of a cry on the floor about being 19 in an abbey against her will. And she spoke with Margaret about that. And they were talking about how Catherine II had been really nice to all of them and tried to help them with the fact that they felt, abandoned in this abbey. And Catherine II had been planning a trip to Italy with Flora, and Flora really missed her. Hedwig put her foot in it with Margaret by asking her if she came from really far away, when Margaret's family had been in England for 3 generations at this point. Real cringe-ass moment, Hedwig. Not great. That's probably permanently altered her relationship with Margaret, which sucks, because I really like Margaret and I want to see more of her. But that's going to be an obstacle to that. Most importantly, however, she did just get out of the cupboard. She doesn't know what racism is. Fortunately, that means she can't accidentally perpetuate it. Most importantly, we talked with Catherine I, and we found out a couple things about her. Namely that she was originally the lady of a great house. She was from a noble family, and there was a lot of, politics involved in that. And at one point, she was accused of something that would have resulted in her taking the death penalty had she not agreed to go to an abbey instead. So either take the vows or take the axe, really. So she came to Limbarétor, where she can momentarily grasp life's few pleasures, as she put it. So that's her backstory of why she's here. And then after that, there was a fight because the mysterious demon figure showed up again, and revealed itself to actually just be Eustace wearing some really big armor and swinging around Catherine's sword, the sword that Catherine was killed with. And notably, the sword that Catherine was killed with belonged to Catherine. It wasn't the stable boy's sword, whatever that kid's job is. It wasn't his sword. Angela had misrepresented that. It's Catherine's sword. Eustace was swinging it around trying to scare people. And once they, unmasked her and figured out it was Eustace, everybody was real fucking mad at her. Hedwig slapped her, and she ran off, and at that point the Misericorde gathering broke up, and everyone was a bit like, oh fuck, shit night, huh lads? And so, yeah, Hedwig couldn't sleep after that, because it's kind of a crazy thing to deal with in any circumstances, not just when you lived in a hole for 30 years. And she went for a walk, and while on a walk she found a mysterious other nun figure on the distance walking towards the hospitalum where James the accused was. She sort of like runs around, tries to avoid her, but also tries to keep an eye on her, and faints. And when she wakes up, she's with Catherine I, who was once a lady of a great house. And she uses this as her opportunity to question her about James. And yes, it was Catherine I who was going to see James, and she can vouch that James was not wearing a tunic when Catherine's body was found, because Catherine I and James were fucking, and that's why she knows James didn't do it, because he has an alibi, and the alibi is that he was inside her at the time. But Hedwig, being Hedwig, hears this and faints again, and is then found by Moira and Catherine. I told you, right back in episode 1, I was like, she's got a man in her room, and she had a man in her room. She has a mole here, and that means she's a slut. Yeah, so Catherine went and got Moira, and they revived Hedwig, and Catherine was sort of very firmly like, you must be delirious to think that we had a conversation before you fainted. You only spoke to me after you fainted, get it? Moira's worried about Hedwig's health, so is the superior who was there. We also get like this weird tangential, like earlier in the Misericorde, this weird implication that something very bad happened to the previous Mother Superior. Anyway, and that's about where we left off, is that Hedwig's been brought back to her room and everyone's worried about her, but she knows that James could not have killed Catherine, because at the time of the murder, he was fucking the other Catherine. So let's get back into it. Groovin'. I sighed and collapsed face first into my bed. I didn't even have the energy to undress, and I was asleep before I hit the pillow. I dreamed of soldiers chasing me with pikes. Oh, that is the end of that chapter. Okay, all my speculation on how long chapters were for naught. Well, not really for naught. But just sort of a surprise. Is that a kitty? Or perhaps some great beast? Kind of looks like a lion. Yeah, the biggest kitty. I woke feeling even worse than when I had fallen into bed. The soreness in my body had escalated to stiffness. I groaned aloud as soon as I realized I was no longer sleeping. I would take my chances with the armies in my dreams. I could hear people shuffling outside my door. I was somewhat surprised that I had even managed to wake up at my usual hour, considering how late I had been up and how exhausted I felt. It was all I could do to roll off the bed and stumble out of my room to join everyone for service. I could barely stay awake through the whole thing, which made me feel wretched. I'd already forgone praying the full set of the hours. If I could not even make it through these compromised services, who was I? Hedwig! How are you feeling? How on earth could she be so chipper after a night like ours? Fading, I must admit. She giggled and offered a sympathetic expression. I gave her a perfunctory smile back and took off in the direction of the superior's office for our requested meeting. She fainted, and the superior was like, come see me in the morning so I can make sure you're well, by which she means let's debrief on the James thing. I made it there before the superior did. She was a few minutes behind me, no doubt the last to leave the chapel. Goodness, Hedwig, you know you can always skip morning service if you feel ill. I'm quite alright. She unlocked the door and ushered me inside hastily. So, yes, your superior. I do hope that you have some news for me, even with your little tumble. Yes, as a matter of fact. She nodded with faint approval and urged me to sit down. I did so gratefully. She, in turn, sat in her grand chair. I was able to ask Catherine about the tunic. Indeed, she can vouch for James. Well, that's fantastic news. What did she say? How did you approach the subject? Oh, more cringe Hedwig moments coming up. As the evening wore on, things got looser and looser. I simply asked the question at an opportune time. In my head, I was navigating through a thick fog. I was unsure of how much information to divulge to the superior to spare her the embarrassment of hearing it, and me the embarrassment of having to say it. What about Catherine? This could ruin her life. Is that all? You seem a little worse for wear. I heard whispers of things getting rather heated. How so? Well, Angela was in here complaining about something or another at one point. Yes, there was a bit of a kerfuffle at one point. I see. She finds making friends rather difficult, I am aware. Is that all? Nothing relevant, no. She raised an eyebrow. No, actually, that's not true. Eustace knocked on the door at one point later in the evening, dressed as a ghost, and waggled a sword at me as some sort of mean-spirited joke. And then I slapped her across the face quite hard. And I think Flora might be plotting to run away, which would be horrible. We have to help her see reason. And then after the evening fell apart, I couldn't sleep, and I went for a walk to clear my head. But I saw someone walking towards the hospital, and I followed them, and it was Catherine, and I heard her talking to James, but I couldn't quite hear what they were talking about. And then I ran all the way back in the dark and collapsed on the path, and then Catherine found me, and that's when I really asked her about it. She admitted it, and the thing about the tunic, she said she saw him that day without one, and both of the superior's eyebrows are raised now. Well. And then... Yes. I realized I was panting. Nothing. Sorry, I got carried away. That's everything. So, Catherine spoke to James in the middle of the night. How odd. I fear this does not allay my suspicions. No? She's got such wet cat energy. She does. Hedwig is sopping wet. I'd hold her in both hands like this and she would just like dangle. She really does find out everything in the worst way. She's like tripping ass first into solutions to problems that she created. He claims Catherine could vouch for him about this tunic of his that is supposedly able to clear his name. But if they were conspiring in secret, how do I know the whole idea wasn't simply concocted out of thin air? I suppose there's no way of knowing. Conspiring, yeah, that's one thing to call it. I applaud your investigation work, but I'm afraid this puts us right back where we started. Not without further corroboration, anyway. As is, this is tainted testimony at best. I had a strong suspicion that Catherine had been telling the whole truth to me last night. She'd been very reluctant to speak on it, and her strong hints in this very office that some embarrassing truth was my secret to keep did not feel like they were part of some grander lie. Surely, if that was the case, she would be spreading the lie further afield. But I couldn't bring myself to tell the superior. It was embarrassing. It was based entirely on my personal feelings. And if by some small chance Catherine was capable of murder, I would not want to make myself her next target. Tainted testimony, in particular given Catherine's circumstances. Unless there's another detail here that makes you find this story more believable. I had reneged on my promise to Catherine to not speak a word of the night's events to anyone else already. But something else was keeping me from sharing the final, perhaps critical element of her story. I felt dirty just thinking about it, and I did not want to even imagine what Catherine might do if she suspected that I had blabbered about her liaisons with James. Hedwig is being quite selfish in this moment. She's like, oh, what's going to happen to me if I share the secret? It's like, dude, what's going to happen to Catherine if I find out that she's a nun who's been, fornicating? That's big consequences time. I don't know exactly what consequences, but they're not good ones. Especially, I remembered with a shiver, while she still had access to the sword. Even if she was innocent of Catherine's murder, I worried I might become her victim if I used this information against her. Hedwig, tomorrow I would like you to travel to the village with some companions. Oh, field trip! Let's go! Which, I mean, we're literally tripping across a field. That is true, she has been in constant fight or flight. Yeah, like I totally understand where she's coming from. And I feel like all of these reactions are totally reasonable. But she didn't even think once about what might happen to Catherine. I don't know. I think she's a well-actualized character in the sense that she finds it difficult to put herself in other people's shoes, which makes perfect sense. Because, like, she barely has a sense of self. Because to have a sense of self, you need to have a defined sense of other. And this is the first time she's really, like, interacting with the concept of anything that's not herself. If that makes sense. These words felt like a cold bucket of water. The village. She barely has shoes. Yeah, she's probably got, like, one pair. And, like, some wooden clogs or something. Indeed. Do not worry. As I said, you will not be alone. I realize it will be a new experience. Catherine will be included, I presume? Goodness, no. Moira and Eustace, that would be fine. Not Eustace, please. Now, we can't have you two falling out over this. You must work together. I'm sure I do not need to remind you that you must maintain a healthy relationship with everyone. Must I? Of course! For heaven's sakes! Don't complain. It's not that often someone gets to go down to the village. A trip out with Eustace might do both of you some good. Get some fresh air with your compatriots and commiserate over a change of scenery. It was not that long ago she was in here speaking quite highly of you, I might add. Well, what is it we would be doing in the village? There are people there who would be able to provide some insight into how seriously we should take James and Catherine's insistence. Goodness, it's a shame you weren't able to hear what they were talking about. It would save us a lot of time. I weighed my options. As stressful as it was to imagine, I decided that a trip beyond the bounds of the Abbey would be preferable to risking Catherine's rage. Besides, the Superior seemed quite adamant about the idea. I shouldn't have followed her in the first place. I certainly wouldn't have suggested it, but it was brave of you. You're beginning to think on your feet. Perhaps the chess lessons are helping. Quite possible. Anyhow, knowing that Catherine and James are in communication complicates things, but perhaps we can glean some idea of whether she knows something and is helping James out of guilt, or if something more sinister is going on. I'm afraid I don't follow. Hedvig, do you not know why Catherine left the comfort of the village? She did mention it last night in the Misericorde. Something about local politics. She offended the wrong person or something like that. The Superior let out a surprising chortle. I see. Well, I suppose that is not untrue. So I'm rather surprised. I would have expected the rumours around her to be one of the first things you heard. What rumours? That Sister Catherine murdered her husband? Oh my god! Yo, what the fuck? This game rules! Jules, I was about to say the same thing. I hope she did. I 100% believe that she did, and I'm 100% willing to, like, proclaim her innocence on her behalf. I nearly choked on air. She... What? The Superior held up a hand gently. I do not believe it for an instant, to be clear. In fact, I think it's very likely that this is precisely the kind of story the people she expressed contempt for would concoct to harm her reputation. She was in a competitive business, you understand. Or rather, her husband was. I tried my very best to keep up with the conversation, although my throat felt bone dry. It was difficult to get the words out. And what was that? The vineyard, of course. You might see it on your way down the mountain. If a medieval woman kill her husband, he have it coming. 100%. 100%. Before divorce was invented, you had to do something. Hell, I mean, even now, it's not always possible for people. You gotta do something. It's a particularly good one, I might add. At least for this country. All of our wine uses grapes from the slopes of Lindbauer. So you think that her husband just died and she was blamed? His head just did that. I have no proof, but it's more believable than her killing someone. But this is Sister Catherine we are talking about. Sister Catherine of a few years ago, at least. No, her story is that the man fell down the stairs and some unscrupulous hawks saw an opportunity to stop her from inheriting a fortune. Yeah, falling down the stairs can be really dangerous, especially medieval stairs. Like, some of those old-timey stairs, they're like this steep. It ain't right. It's like a ladder. And like, if he was carrying a wine barrel or something, it's so easy to fall downstairs. So easy to push someone downstairs. Yeah, they're not OHS. They had not invented occupational health and safety by then. There was neither health nor safety. They had occupations, but they were not... They were unhealthy and unsafe. So in the village, speak with the townsfolk. Oh, I love to get an instruction to speak with the townsfolk. That's my favorite kind of quest. It's like, yeah, let's go listen to some NPC dialogue. I am curious how they feel about Catherine now. Perhaps there is a pattern we have overlooked. I thought you believed Catherine. Surely this is a waste of time. I do believe that Catherine is innocent of murdering her husband, but I must confess it is purely a gut feeling. Poke around for me, see if there's any evidence to support that claim. It would be good to show the bishop some support from a source who is not also accused of a similar crime. You're worried Catherine and James are conspiring. You think they might have killed her, together? Thanks to your intrepid investigation last night, we can no longer rely solely on them vouching for each other. We have a responsibility to follow up on their connection, no matter how I feel. Perhaps I've been played for a fool. We'll concoct a simple cover story for your visit, bringing some finished wine or some other goods down to share, perhaps. My heart sank. I'd just put Catherine in harm's way, it seemed. Although, perhaps I was in harm's way around Catherine. This was all too much to keep in my head at once. She does feel bad about, putting the spotlight on Catherine. Okay. Just say it, a voice in my head murmured. No, you can't, man! Just tell the superior that Catherine has been... Don't do it, bro. Has been... What should I ask? Who should I speak to? Good girl. Just speak to whomever will give you their time. Bring the topic up carefully. And just... get a sense. A sense? Dude, she's been in the sensory deprivation room for, several decades. She doesn't have any sense. Anyway, this is good. We are making progress. You are doing quite well for yourself, I must say. You're quite resourceful. Thank you. But does Eustace have to come with us if I really am going on this village trip? As I said, it sounds like an opportunity to mend whatever bridge between you has already broken. I see no reason to keep you apart. All I could do was sigh. I was pouting just a little, I will admit. I will meet you halfway. I shall send the word to both Moira and Eustace for you, so you will be spared at least one awkward conversation. Fair enough? Thank you. She sighed and rested her chin on her hand. Sometimes I wonder how I manage. Sounds like you could pen a whole book about the drama happening beneath my station this week alone. Or perhaps some sort of novel, perhaps in a visual format. Some sort of visual novel. I look forward to reading your chronicles one day. It's not so bad. So I thought until, well, she made a cutting gesture across her neck with a grimace. You can't refer to a murder of someone who was, who you were responsible for by doing this. That's not... That ain't right, Mother Superior. I used to think it was good to let these things be and let the sisters sort things out amongst themselves, but... It is very funny. She is very funny. Oh. Could I have prevented Catherine's murder if I had taken a more active interest in the whispers that would stop after I turned the corner? Surely I don't know. I do not like meddling, and our circumstances have conspired such that I must meddle greatly, though through you. Alas. I noticed the faintest whiff of wine on her breath as she exhaled a deep sigh. I'm afraid I am in no state for chess this morning. Have a productive rest of your day, Sister Hedvig. I stood up from my chair and clasped my hands together, holding them out half-heartedly. Thank you, Mother Superior. I will endeavour to do so. She nodded and beckoned to the door. I left swiftly. I could feel the pressure building in my head, beginning to match the aching of my body. I groaned aloud and rolled my head around my shoulders. I've been doing that constantly. Every day I'm just ugh! Every hour. I'll make a noise and crackle my back. It's a lovely morning, at least. A wispy cloud of fog had settled over the grass in the cloister, and sunbeams reflected out of it at pleasing angles as I walked past. Hedvig, dear, good morning. Martin and Charity were seated in wooden chairs at the edge of the grass, looking perfectly relaxed. Are they doing that old person thing where they just sit and look out over nature and just talk about nothing? I smiled wearily and waved at Marta, who beckoned me closer. In trouble, worry? I make it sound like Yoda. Oh no, the superior just wanted a report on how I was feeling. I fainted last night on my way to the privy. Oh dear, we had quite a night, didn't we? Charity's been telling me all about it. There was a dark glint in her eye that I did not altogether appreciate. I feel ashamed. Don't be. Lord knows I've wanted to smack Eustace more than once. She can be a pompous little thing, and she deserves it for scaring you girls witless. Still, I didn't know you had it in you. Nor her, for that matter. I had no idea either. I've never struck anyone before. I abhor violence. Huh! Don't we all until it suits us? Just try not to make a habit of it. She says as if she never did. My fighting days are behind me, I'm afraid. Whoa, Marta had fighting days? She should be more violent. Jules just behind every nun whispering in there, like, she should be more violent. Should have more sex and kill more people. Break more commandments. I was just noticing the eye patch myself. I was like, there's going to be a cool story behind that from her fighting days. It is much more difficult to bring people upright with only harsh words. I've tried hitting some sense into these women, and it hasn't taken. I've tried pleading with them about the virtues of living well, and it never stuck. I'm afraid, then, that I must instead simply appeal to your good nature, Hedvig. I don't want you to end up like Catherine. Oh, goodness, I apologize for offending you. You didn't. She didn't, did she, Marta? No, not at all. I'm just reminded of Catherine's flirtations with that particular kind of apologia. Nobody really abhors violence. I failed to turn the other cheek, as it were. As I would have as well in your position. Oh, Marta, you're just in one of your moods. I am starting to realize that I have been in one of my moods since Catherine was taken from us, and I'm not sure I will ever fully recover. Damn. Sorry, Marta. It's okay. Mental health at any age. As if that's your fault. Was it not? I gave up on her. Her gift for persuasion was too much for me. I let her get away with too much. Catherine's silver tongue stayed my hand too often. Do you remember when she locked Flora in that box? She what? Oh my, yes. What happened? One day, I went down to the cellars a little early, and I heard an alarming racket coming from one of the crates we used for packing wine bottles. I opened the lid, and what do I find inside? Poor little Flora, gasping for air, curled up so tight I had to enlist 2 sisters to help pull her out. It was a very strange morning. Flora, of course, would say nothing. Tried to post her to Friedrich. Deliver to Italy. She was very loyal to Catherine. Catherine, though, confessed to everything almost immediately. She admitted it was all a practical joke that had gone too far, and that she hadn't known that the lid was too tight to let air in. Why on earth would she think to put Flora in there in the first place? Only God knows. It might have been like prep for an escape attempt. You know, honestly, it might have been, because that's what Flora was talking about last night when she was drunk. Is like, she had a bunch of like crazy ideas for how to get out of the nunnery. One of them was to heist the gold leaf Hedvig used for illumination, and then use that to buy her way to freedom. And Hedvig had to explain to her that it's gold leaf. There's very little value to it. And I was sitting there like, yeah, you can get like a big pack of that for $15 at Eckersley's. Flora adored Catherine, and they at least shared a wicked sense of humor. Was Flora alright? Oh, she was beside herself for a day or two. And took it out on me, if you can believe it. Goodness. Catherine thought, or knew, I suppose, that she could get away with anything. Why did she confess so quickly, then? That's a good point. Why did she, Marta? You see, even in death she can bargain her way out of scrutiny. She didn't admit to anything because she felt ashamed. She admitted it because she had already gotten away with it. Flora had been found safely. No harm was done in Catherine's eyes. Another lesson avoided.
Off she went on her merry way, with nothing but a minute's awkward conversation as penance.
I think you're being a mite too harsh.
Who would punish her? Not the superior. Lord knows nobody would break the unspoken agreement to cut her out of our affairs that Catherine orchestrated.
Huh. So it was Catherine's decision to, like, sort of keep the soup in the dark about most things. Because the superior doesn't know what goes on in the Misericorde. A minute's awkward conversation is like being waterboarded. You're not wrong, especially for Hedwig. But Catherine seems like the sort of person who was just like water off a duck's back. But yeah, the soup doesn't know what goes on in the Misericorde most nights. She doesn't pry too much, and no one snitches to her. Hedwig is unusual in that she snitches, and everyone hates Angela because she snitches. It's Catherine that sort of set up that whole vibe. Interesting.
Would I punish her? I should have, but no. It was too late by then. I was already under her spell.
Punishing her wouldn't have changed what happened to her.
Would it not? I don't know. I don't believe in random chance. All flowers were seeds sown. I could have shaped her into someone great. Instead, I gave up trying. Catherine is my greatest failure.
Jesus, this is really intense. Marta feels like really personally responsible for not only Catherine's death, but every action Catherine ever took, and that's crazy to me.
I know you don't mean all that. I know you miss her. I do. Despite it all, I do.
Charity had started getting glassy-eyed. Marta reached over to touch her plump wrist with her own bony fingers.
Now, no getting wistful in front of poor Hedwig. I'm sure she has better things to do than to listen to two old bats whinge. Where are you off to, Hedwig? There's another chair around here somewhere. Oh, behind you.
Oh, I'm off to the library, actually. Marta's dark mood certainly hadn't sold the idea as the most appealing way I could imagine spending my morning.
Chronicling can wait, surely.
It's not like you're going to forget last night anytime soon, huh? In the end, I did not need much convincing. The longer I could put off running to Eustace, the better, even if Marta was feeling particularly sour. I brought the spare chair over and sat down for more conversation.
So, aside from last night's escapade in the Misericorde, how have you been doing?
Very well. Very well. I mean, there's a lot to get used to, but I am adjusting.
Is there anything still confusing to you about the outside world?
Oh, loads, I'm sure, but I'm carrying along. I did learn that there was a war going on. That was quite a shock.
Oh, that old thing feels like it's going to come off.
Oh, you say it's like a war that's been going on for like 100 years? Feels like it's been going on for most of my life.
It used to be a bit more of a worry, but these days it's exhausting to even think about. It was a little more concerning when... Good Lord, Hexham was well over 20 years ago now, wasn't it? And Hedgley. We were a little more worried when those were going on. A little bit closer to home, those were. You would have been here in 64, Hedwig.
Just about, I think. Were you there as well? I do not like talking about myself. Yeah, we noticed, Hedwig. This is why I don't know anything about you and it drives me insane.
Not far. I was at the abbey across the valley and down the hill. Burn Grove. I moved around a lot in those days. Durham, Richmond, Ripon.
What side of the war are we on?
I wouldn't worry about that.
You'd be hard-pressed to find any strong opinions on the war here, I'd reckon. They're fighting over who gets to be king. That's well above my opinion.
Those two guys at the beginning, do you remember?
There was a prologue with just like these two guys. I want to kill the bloody King of England.
It's connected somehow. It matters somehow. Who was Catherine? She's linked to the war somehow. The church is above all these things. These are petty worldly squabbles in the end.
Even though the royal bloodline is anointed by God. Oh yeah, it's the divine right of kings. Have you forgotten the mandate of heaven? Do you ever think about that? How like divine right of kings and mandate of heaven are pretty much synonyms, but we use them to refer to like different like parts of the world for some reason. Like, for some reason, it's divine right of kings in Europe and mandate of heaven in Asia, and it just feels kind of othering for no reason, because it's very much the exact same concept, even though the deities are different. Whatever.
That may be so, but men have found so many ways to bicker over the specifics of what God has said.
Too right, too right. What about you, Charity? Have you always been here at Lynn Barrett?
For a long time, yes, but not forever. I got my start at Burngrove, actually, and followed Marta here when she transferred. We were too good of friends not to go together, isn't that right?
Do you think it's because of translation of regionally specific tests? I do. I think it's very much just like a... That happens like all the time, actually, is that like one translation will happen once in 16 whatever, and then we just use that terminology forever, regardless of the accuracy of the translation, or the fact that there might be an equivalent term that's like less unwieldy or more familiar to us, like already in the language. And like it might have been deliberately othering translation, it might have been like a very direct translation. You like the term mandate of heaven better? So do I. I think it sounds cooler. Because it sort of like... It feels double-edged in a way, because divine right of kings sounds like a... Just like a congrats, God says you're king. Mandate of heaven is more like a... Deity, whatever deity you believe in, has demanded you are king. And everybody, including you, has to submit to that. Otherwise, the concept of holiness will be against you. And yeah, I like that better. I think it's cooler. And I think it would be a better rallying cry for a holy war of succession. I think they are slightly distinct concepts in the way you describe. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me if there was like different like emphases and stuff. It just, I don't know, it's always sort of stuck out to me as like a weirdly othering distinction. It ties into like a lot of Orientalism, especially in the way we see, you know, in the West we view like Chinese history. Eurotheology is more likely to refer to the divine. See, I think that can vary from language to language, because like in German language, you see a lot of like heaven stuff. Yeah, but like, why is that specifically used? Why is that translation specifically used? Like heavenly, you do get a lot in Western theology, I think, or at least in like German stuff. But like, yeah, I don't know. I'm not qualified for this conversation. It's just a thing I pointed out. Martha had a thin smile on her face. Oh, what a nice story.
Indeed. Have you been making many friends with the girls your age?
The girls. This felt like a patently ridiculous way to describe a group of women I assumed were mostly in their 20s and 30s, but perhaps I'll understand when I'm Martha's age. I worry that I'm losing more than I am making.
I'm sure that's not true. I know for a fact Maura is quite taken with your presence. And Darcy, for that matter. And we don't invite just anyone to sit with us.
That's right. I smiled and leaned back in my chair. It was hard to get comfortable when my body still felt bent completely out of shape. Well, thank you. I should probably get to work.
Godspeed. We're on your side. God bless her, but it was a mean thing Eustace did.
Universally designated rightness. Well, yeah, we need to like concepts of godliness. Yeah. I stood up slowly and offered Charity an appreciative smile as I left. I made my way upstairs, dreading what the rest of my morning was going to look like with Eustace across the room from me. But it turned out she was not there. Either she had finished her work while I had been dawdling, or she had let her own discomfort get the better of her, and do what I wasn't strong enough to do, and simply not show up. I sighed and sat down at my desk. I opened up the massive book I was filling with my daily chronicles, but I was unsure what to write. The amount of delicate pruning I would have to do made it difficult to know how to begin at all. Against my better judgment. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's sort of like the implications I was getting at. That's okay, man. It's an interesting concept. That's interesting. I didn't realize that like the mandate of heaven meant that like your divine right to rule, as it were, was revoked if you were shit at it. Meanwhile, over in Europe, the divine right is sort of like a bloodline thing. So like it doesn't matter how crap he is, if he's the rightful king, you gotta bow. That is an interesting distinction, and I guess it does warrant a different, phraseology. Against my better judgment, I was not about to commit Catherine's sin to writing, and I didn't particularly want to immortalize my altercation with Eustace. Or did I? I considered that extolling these sins might take some of their weight from my shoulders. If I was not being entirely truthful to those around me, I could at least be truthful to myself and God. But people can read this, though. I was becoming changed in many ways outside of myself, but I did not want to become a liar. I was no liar, I told myself. I was no thief. I scratched my quill against the page idly as I debated myself in my own head. It was so quiet in the library that the sound seemed to fill the room. It didn't help me decide. As Charity had said, it wasn't like I was about to forget any of this. I closed the book and stood up. I at least had the wherewithal to recognize when no work was about to get done. Eustace still hadn't shown up. I looked towards the bookshelves, the ones that seemed to stretch on forever into the darkness. Without Eustace here, could I... No, hurt as I was by her cruel game of dress-up, I had no intention of exacting any more revenge upon her. Slapping her was already beyond the pale. Breaking her library rules would just be petty. Wouldn't it? I found myself in argument with my own reasoning again. They were just books. What right did she have to tell me what to do? Was I so cowed by her that I feared what she might do if I touched her precious books? Set one of them out of order? Hello. Yay, Darcy time! Darcy had shuffled into the library carrying a long, hooked staff that I could only assume was a shepherd's crook. Oh, if I'm too unfunny, she's going to yank me off stream. Oh, hello, Darcy. Can I help you? Actually, used to share me. Oh, she's feeling under the weather, and I can come to the library today. That's quite all right. I understand. She suggested I take you with me to watch the sheep today. Oh, well, I have work to do still, actually, but... Oh, don't worry about that. You can always come do it tomorrow. I'm not always in charge of the sheep. You don't want to miss this. Come on. It's time for sheep. It's time for sheep, Hedvig. I couldn't say no to her, especially after what Charity had said earlier. Oh, all right then. Yay, Darcy time! Darcy beamed and beckoned for me to follow her. We went down the stairs toward the cloister. Charity and Maud had left, presumably to go check in with the wine in the cellars. The sunlight was somewhat diminished. The fog was gone, but I could now see rain clouds gathering ahead. We took a right at the bottom of the stairs and continued past the rectory and kitchens. It's a bit of a hike, if that's right. Oh, is it? I'm quite stiff today, I'm afraid. Have you been to the hospitalum? It's more or less the same distance, but this direction. No, I haven't. More lies, but it was either explain that or explain to Darcy that I had sprinted from the hospitalum last night. What was that I had said earlier about not being a liar, though? I'm sure I'll manage, though. We left through another archway in the surrounding wall. I was beginning to wonder what the point of the abbey walls was in the first place. Anyone, it seemed, could come in from either direction if they fancied it. For a moment, I wondered if it was worth telling the Superior that it would be impossible to fairly accuse anyone of murdering Catherine, which is about any old pervert could have walked into this place. Do you have to say pervert? Darcy had not been exaggerating about the walk. On this side of the abbey, there were no gentle slopes and hillocks. That's a mountain. There were hills, and for the first time it truly struck me that Lynbarrow Tor was more or less a mountain range. Yeah, coming from a... She's a nun. Yeah, she has kind of a lot of sexual neuroses. But, like, coming from a country where our tallest mountain is something you can kind of just, like, meander up, that they took us to on, like, a school trip for us to just, like, meander up this big hill. The fact that this is a hill is kind of blowing my mind. Like, that's a mountain. As we made our way over impossibly green grass, wind whipped our robes around. It's so easy to walk up it. My brother walked up Mount Kosciuszko drunk off his ass in schoolies, perfectly safely. You can't do that with the tallest mountain in basically any other country. Certainly not any other continent. I think Darcy may have been trying to chat, but it was impossible to hear anything clearly over the gusts of wind and flapping fabric. It was truly dizzying up here. I could see the village and the lake as I did on the way to the hospitalum. They were utterly dwarfed by the hills surrounding them. I like this cool craggy rock outcrop thing here. It was beautiful and terrifying. I'd never felt so small. Eventually, we crested a particularly sharp incline and paused for breathing. Hands on my knees, stumbled over to catch my breath. I noticed a smattering of little white dots against the dark green grass at the slope across from us. Them's the sheeps! There they are! Sheep time, sheep time! We pressed onward. Eventually the hill smoothed out to a more manageable degree. Yeah, look at 'em! By the time we approached the grazing sheep, the land was practically flat. It was as if we were on a tiny shelf on the side of the hill. Sheep are so good. I went to the Royal Easter Show this year, and they had a big petting zoo. That's like the agricultural fair, for our state. It's actually like the national championship for the agricultural fair in Australia. But yeah, they have like a giant petting zoo, and you can touch all the sheep and lambs and goats and, you know, animals of that kind. Rabbits. What else? Alpacas. They had alpacas, but like in a separate pen on the edge of the petting zoo. Everyone around the world should know what the Easter Show is. It's like, you know, whatever your country does when people go to show off their sheep and you buy like the worst junk food of all time, and then you go on a roller coaster while full of junk food and smelling animal droppings, and you feel really not sick at all. That's what the Easter Show is. By the time we approached the grazing sheep, yep, I already said that. It's just like a shelf. Alright then. Here's just my favorite job. You have so many responsibilities. How do you manage? There is a little duck water park at the Easter Show. The duck water park is awesome. They're the little ducklings. They go like a slide. They go the water. There are quilts. There's some very good quilts. I saw a really cool quilt that had a bunch of like different sized tessellating stars of David in different colors. It was very trippy and very beautiful. Well, that's true. But to me, it's just hardly a responsibility. Just look at them. She gestures towards the sheep, who had all turned to look at us. They're all chewing grass and seem to be regarding me with the same kind of disinterest I generally expected from the sisters. Don't call your fellow sisters sheep. They're a bit scary. Yeah, Hedwig has no experience with, like, animals. What? I've never seen any animal up close, and there's so many of them. Yeah, sheep. They're nice. Look at that one. Ori likes you. She pointed behind me with her crook. Oh, the little black face! I love a little black sheep. I turned around and yelped. One of the sheep was standing right next to me, looking up at me while continuing to munch on grass. Yep! You can touch him if you like. No, that's... I shan't be doing that. Here, try. One of the sheep had approached her, and she was patting it on the head gently. I wouldn't say the creature appeared to be enjoying it, but at the very least it wasn't attacking Darcy over it. Yeah, sheep is so... There's so little going on in sheep's head that you, like, pat them and they're like, yeah, I guess this is happening to me. I held my breath and reached out a hand to touch the sheep closest to me. Hello. I rubbed the top of its head. It didn't really seem to care one way or another, but I hadn't lost any fingers. So, what do we do? Dish. We just stand out here. Yes. We just want to make sure nothing attacks them or eats them. What would do that up here? Wolf. The word sent a chill up my spine. That's terrifying. It would be, but how many wolves around here anymore? I've not seen a wolf in a very long time. And just from afar at that. That's comforting. It was not comforting at all. Knowing my luck, I felt like we were doomed to be torn to ribbons by the first pack of wolves Darcy had ever seen up close. What was that story from the Bible she was talking about earlier about the... Go up, thou bold one, and then, like, the children are ripped to shreds by a bear? Okay. I forgot that Amith went to vet school for several years and was like, what do you mean he can flip a sheep? But no, when you shear a sheep, you flip them. Yes. What, like, I feel like the stupidity of a sheep is kind of beneficial in a veterinary situation, because, like, a cat knows what's going on in a vet and it does not like it. A sheep, though, doesn't know what's going on, and you can just, like, move them. You flip them. Though I guess that means they're also, you know, prone to wandering off and injuring themselves, or getting confused and trying to eat your doctor's coat thing. I forget how many people we know who have, like, vet training. Huh. Yes, enjoyed it. I get some of this lovely fresh air. Likes them better than alpacas for that reason. Yeah, alpacas feel like an unwieldy animal to try and do anything with, except pat them. Like, cause like, an alpaca is, like, genuinely pretty nice. If you're just, like, approaching them to pat them. But, like, if I had to do anything, like, even just shearing them, let alone trying to give them some sort of, you know, internal exam the way you do with animals, they're big. They're, like, tall. That's intimidating. People who do like agricultural vet work are really impressive. Like, people who help cows give birth, cows are fucking enormous, and you're like, it's in a very vulnerable state, it's very afraid, it's in pain, and you gotta, like, get in there to help. That's difficult. But let's listen to Darcy's advice and just enjoy some digital sheeps. We were sheltered from the wind on this side of the hill, and the air was cool and damp. The rain clouds, however, still threatened above us. In fact, as soon as Darcy had finished encouraging me to take in the fresh air... Oh man, it's raining pixels! Hedwig, look out! Fuck, I wish somebody had invented the umbrella by now! Wow. Wow, would you look at that? I couldn't help but laugh. Yes. Just our luck. Just our luck. To be honest, I quite like the rain. Hold on, what is the myth saying? When you look in a sheep's eye, you can see their soul. When you look in an alpaca's eyes, it's the deepest pits of hell. Oh shit, how does he feel about llamas? Because I know those are just, like, meaner alpacas. Has he been too afraid to gaze into the eyes of a llama? It does sound like something a nun would say. I don't know how many opportunities there are to gaze into the eyes of a llama in rural New South Wales, though. Yeah, I was going to say, like, we have alpacas because the wool is good and they're more docile than llamas. If there weren't already llamas here, there's no reason to bring them anywhere. I couldn't remember the last time I had been outside in the rain. In my cell, I had always left the window hatch open a crack when it began to rain, just to catch a bit of the fresh scent that followed. Oh. Sometimes I would stick my hand out just to get my hand wet, just to feel something curious and different. Oh god, that's so sad. I felt so thankful every time I caught a few raindrops in my palm to be alive. Jesus. Or whenever I felt a sunbeam hit my back, hunched over my writing desk. Or when I would catch a fleck of snow and watch it melt into the creases of my skin. That had been enough. See, you said llama song and it immediately popped into my head. Like, we were like, what, 14 in 2012? We remember that damn llama song. It's kind of funny having, like, this deeply emotional moment and then look over here, you're talking about llamas. Well, yeah, it was earlier than that, but, like, I don't know, I feel like 2012 was such, like, a peak moment for that kind of stuff. Anyway, that had been enough. That had always been enough for me. I'd never wanted to leave. I would have been happy for my whole life for that little room as long as I could see the rain outside my window. I was glad it was raining. I did not want to have to explain the tears rolling down my cheeks to Darcy. I like the rain too. Finally, someone else who agrees. Well, let's get these little beasties out of the rain, shall we? Oh, look, there she is, little Darcy. Darcy began to gently shoo the sheep around her with her staff. She pointed at a rickety wooden structure near the slope of the hill. Try and get him over there. Oh, she's playing like a herding minigame. I had no idea what to do, especially without a crook of my own. You can just sort of like grab him and push. I sort of gestured at the sheep around me, I suppose. Maybe politeness would serve me where physicality couldn't. Come along, come along. Please. Thankfully, it seemed like the flock didn't need me to tell them what to do. Most of the sheep were trotting towards Darcy's structure of their own accord. A few stayed huddled in front of me. I wondered if they were pretending to be herded for my benefit. I made it onto the wooden shelter just as it started pouring. Darcy was leaning against her crook, surveying the hills in front of us with a serene expression. I navigated through several nonplussed sheep to stand next to her. Good work. So, have you been coming out here every day? Oh, goodness, no. I like to do it, but I'm very busy. Maura does it sometimes, and also I think Margaret... Catherine would as well. Our Catherine? That's hard to imagine. Catherine the second. Oh. They aren't our sheep, strictly speaking. We just like to volunteer, but they're from the village. This is just where they come for transhumance. For transhumanism? You're giving the sheep transhumanism? What's that? Oh, we have to rotate where the sheep... No, it's just like an agricultural thing. You have to rotate where the sheep graze depending on the time of the year. Normally that man James should handle most of the sheep herding up here, but... Well, you know. Oh, he's the accused. Yes. Yes. How horrible. There was a pregnant pause. Do you think he did kill her? I couldn't say. Angela found him trying to run from the abbey and his cloak was covered in blood. I found it. Did you know that? I didn't even know anything bad had happened. I was busy putting out a fire in the dormitory. There was a fire in the... Hold on! Does she mean in the fireplace? But, like, putting out a fire in the dormitory... Like, normally you would say, like, I was, like, cleaning out the grate, or I was, like, freshening up a fireplace, like, you know. Putting out a fire means there was, like, a fire. I only noticed a cart in the distance out the window. A fire? This is the first I'd heard about this detail. Thank you. Yes. Someone had put too much fuel in the fireplace and it was blowing embers around. More of a nuisance than a danger, but it was getting out of hand. Anyway, all the evidence points to James being a little bastard, but strange things happen around here. I'm worried how simple it all seems. Like people dressing up as ghosts, you mean? This slipped out before I could register how barbed it sounded. Eustace was Darcy's close friend, and I realized any story Darcy had been told about last night would have been from Eustace's bespectacled perspective. I was relieved then when Darcy let out a guttural chuckle. What am I going to do with you two? Is she very upset? She told me all about it and it sounded very sad. And I told her, well, it did sound like what you did was a bit cruel, and then she got mad and went to sleep. She'll be fine, I think. Give it a few days. A few days? Maybe a week? I can't say for sure. Perspective. Is that normal? Yes, Hedvig. Sometimes people will have experienced strong emotions and they won't be able to, you know, act as best as they'd like to, and then after a few days they get over it and they can return to, you know, being civil and thinking through their actions before they take them. Oh, you're not used to people being angry with you. I'm starting to worry I will have to get used to it very quickly. Eustace gets very angry very quickly. I would not put too much thought into it. She and Adela avoided each other for a month because Eustace said sherry tasted like trough water. And Adela said, well, how do you know what trough water tastes like? And a few days later, Adela said that some of the beer we had at lunch tastes like piss. And Eustace was ready with, how do you know what piss tastes like? Classic. Classic, how do you know what piss tastes like? Catherine made him have a shortfall. Oh my god! Hold up. Why is the game not about this one incident? I need to see Eustace and Adela have a proper sword fight. Wait, hold on. We wouldn't charge. Oh. Even still! Yeah, Catherine was a bit obsessed with them. She tried to train us, all of us as swordsmen at one point. She gets it. Catherine gets it. Catherine gets it on every front. Swordswomen. Sword women. However one might say it. Why on earth would she do that? Well, as I'm sure you have noticed, there are not many of us here. Yes. And did you know there's a war going on? I had heard that. Well, Catherine wanted us all to be able to defend ourselves, I suppose. Just in case. Okay, big brain time. Do you remember in the very prologue the two guys were talking about their plan to kill the bloody King of England. And one of them recommended an abbey as a place to lay low for a while, which feels weird, but nonetheless. And that prologue was set a couple of years before this. I'm thinking, what if Catherine was one of those dudes? And either at the time of the prologue, that particular dude was either a woman disguised as a dude, or that dude then disguised himself as a woman to come stay at the abbey. And it is all tied to the war, because Catherine was used to being a powerful man at court, and was just sort of like chafing against, the constrictions of being a nun. And was, thinking about stuff like, oh, why don't we put on plays? Why don't we go travel? Why don't we learn to sword fight? And and she was killed because someone found out who she actually was. Or, Galaxy Brain, she staged her own death, which I still believe, to try and escalate the war somehow, because she is manipulating whoever is investigating her death, which she knew would be Hedwig, manipulating Hedwig from beyond the fake grave to make Hedwig realize Catherine's true identity, so that, everyone at court would see that this important person had been murdered, and the war would escalate based on her death, and also maybe provide an alibi for whatever she wanted to do on next. Yeah, or give her an out to go back to court. I also truly think she's still alive. I also think the gender themes are, very deliberate. Thank you to the dev of this game, by the way, ZC, for giving this stream a shout out on Twitter. Thank you very much. I very much enjoy this game. And I do think there is some obscenely Galaxy Brain shit going on here somehow. That is my take. That's rather extreme. You're right, Hedwig, but that's my take nonetheless. That's what the Superior said when she found out about it. I've heard a lot of stories about Catherine's interests, but I still would never have guessed that one. I think it made a certain amount of sense. It was fun, but it made me a bit uncomfortable when I thought about it longer. I much preferred it when she was really into winemaking. Or sailing. Winemaking? Goodness, I take it Marta wasn't pleased with that. On the contrary, Marta was thrilled someone was interested in as her. As far as I know, Marta taught Catherine everything she knew, and that got Catherine reading about more techniques and showing in the library. And then would tell Marta about that new stuff. And then one day, it just stopped, I suppose. Stopped? I think with Catherine, Darcy trailed off in an uncharacteristic manner that surprised me just as much as the sudden yelp would have. Catherine was unbelievably smart, but nothing ever satisfied her. She got that ADHD brain. I was She's just like me for real. She would become intentionally passionate about a subject or idea for several days or weeks or months, and it would change completely. Real shit. Catherine loved many things aggressively, but it was always one thing at a time. If it was something similar to my interest, I was her best friend. But if it wasn't, I felt like I barely knew her. I don't think I'm alone in that assessment. I miss her. But sometimes I think she was a bad friend. Not everyone will admit it, but I think a lot of us feel that we were at some point jilted by her random interests. One day you're sensitive of her attention, and the next day she's off somewhere else lavishing someone else with the care you thought was just for you. Man, this is intense. She sounds like she had a lot of love to give. She did. That's true. But she would give so intensely, I cannot blame anyone for feeling... hard to choose a word here. Jealous? Jealous sounds so romantic. I think Catherine often gave people a sense of purpose. And then when she got bored or found a new subject to obsess over, that new outlook on life evaporated. Oh yeah. I guess you would feel abandoned. Or lost? Yeah. Damn, this is a lot. Imagine being told you're actually destined to be a queen by someone who starts teaching you etiquette and explain how to do diplomacy to you. I play a lot of games like that, thank you.
And then one day, they're telling someone else this same story. Catherine liked to get us to plan for our futures where we were musicians, or knights, or prophets, but at the end of the day, it was always pure imagination. She would have made a great poet, I think. I'm rubbish at poetry. Was anyone particularly put off by this? This is the first I've really heard about her habits being so controversial. Don't know. Some people minded, some minded less. Margaret was a bit stung when she started spending more time on theatre than music, I think. And Angela had a bit falling out with her, but I suppose there's not a big surprise. I was never bothered by it deeply. Just made me a little sad sometimes. We were attached to Hip for a while, but then one day she started spending more time with Margaret and Moira. But that was okay. She was a savant. But I have my areas of expertise, and I'm quite happy with them. As well you should be. As well you should be, Darcy. You are an alcovisionist. What was that? That was a motorbike. It scared the crap out of me because I thought my cat was growling at something. It really scared me. Your work in the garden is hard to put into words. Darcy beamed. And you seem to have a connection to God that I can only hope to achieve a fraction of. I saw you in the garden that day when Eustace was chronicling your vision. Wondrous. Oh, that. It's interesting. That is exactly what Catherine said to me when we were close. You two spoke about visions. Yeah, she had them too. She wanted to compare them and examine them. We started working on tinctures together to try and enhance them. And one day she just stopped. Stopped having visions. No, I don't think so. In fact, I remember having quite a vivid one. This is what Eustace told me, at least. Like I said, Catherine started spending much less time with me all of a sudden. I know, it's a big reveal. Catherine psychosis era? I don't know, what's going on? Do you know what she saw? Darcy shook her head and landed on her crook. She looked a little weary. I barely remember my own visions if Eustace is there to write them down. I'm not sure anyone was with Catherine when she had the big one. Whatever it was affected her deeply. So deeply that I never wanted to question it. At the time I was worried I'd upset her. It took her to a dark place, I think. Whatever it was she saw. How horrible. We watched the raindrops fall in silence for a moment. An impatient sheep nudged my thigh. You know, it's funny. The vision I saw you have, it was completely true. True in what sense? Well, a lot of it sounded like nonsense at first, but you settled on fire goats, right before you came back to us. Just so. Yes, and that evening I saw, well, Eustace's little joke. Oh, by the way, I reckon from the sound of things that my little concoction worked. Oh, yes, your medieval antidepressant. I suddenly remembered the little potion I had downed before heading to the Misericorde. Oh, dear. Did I drink too much of it? I ended up finishing all of it before the evening started. Do you think that's why I smacked Eustace? No, I think the wine probably had taken over at that point. Oh, weird tea noise. She looked over at me and offered a sympathetic smile. The rain was beginning to slow. Eustace will come around. Oh, pardon me. I do hope so. We have to work together. You can always try apologizing first. Would that help? I wanted to last night. Would that help? Maybe I should just leave her be. No right answer here. Do whatever feels right to you. I'll try. We urged the flock back out into the field once the rain cleared. The rest of our time there was spent in silence. I could occasionally hear Darcy cooing to one of the sheep, but for the most part all I could hear was the wind and my own thoughts. I had heard so many things about Catherine now that I felt I should have a complete idea of who she was. There were people in the Bible who I had less information about, who I could nonetheless picture perfectly. What they would say if I asked them certain questions, how they would react to different situations. Oh man, you got a Jesus tulpa, dude. But every time I felt like I was getting closer to knowing Catherine, my image of her was disturbed. It was as if I was staring into her reflection in a pond, but the surface was being pelted with pebbles. A sense of loss I had felt when the superior told me the news. The desire for justice I had felt that kept me going after breaking my perpetual vow.
Were these feelings based on a lie? Had I simply the luck of being Catherine's newest obsession before she was taken from me? Oof. Whew. Could I even consider her taken from me? I thought about the copy of Medea hidden in my bedroom. What had Catherine's plan for me been? What else would she have told me to make me feel special? Would her visits to the Squint have suddenly ended one day, even if she hadn't died? I was feeling undeniably sour when it was time to leave. Man. We corralled the sheep back into their barn, and then we hiked back to the abbey in silence. I considered asking Darcy about her visions again. Parallels between Catherine and God? Oh my god, your mind. Religiously abandoned by text notes. A girl you don't know. Asking Eustace to see her notes had been a dead end, and I was wickedly entertained by the idea of stepping over her to get what I wanted. A form of retaliation less violent and far more productive than a smack on the cheek. I thought better of it in the end. Thank you for your help, Hedvig. Oh, you're welcome. It was a nice change. Glad to hear it. She smiled and clasped her hands together. I had no idea how she could have energy left to work, but I could scarcely finish my goodbye to her before she had fussed off in the direction of the kitchen. Supper that evening was a quiet affair. Nearly everyone seemed exhausted. I remembered I was not the only one who hadn't gotten much sleep last night. Eustace did not look at me once during the entire meal. A small part of me hoped that she was going to disappear and return with pudding like she had the first time we had dined together, and reveal that her anger had been a front this whole time. This is such, childish hopes, but, Hedvig has, a child's worth of experience socially. The nuns trickled out one by one. I got up and stretched. I still felt incredibly stiff, and I realized hiking out to the sheep and staying on my feet all day was not helping my recovery from last night's marathon. At the very least, I hadn't vomited and passed out today. Margaret and Flora were waiting for me when I left the rectory. Oh, hello. Hello, Hedvig. Flora has a question for you. I'm not 5, I was going to ask anyway. Something wrong? No, just last night. Did you mean it when you said you'd teach me how to paint? I think she means, would you be free to teach me how to paint, please? Sure. That. I must admit that I had already forgotten this promise. I felt bad. Even under duress, I shouldn't have made a commitment I could ignore so easily just to make Flora feel better. I'd absolutely no business teaching anyone to draw, and I desperately wanted to say no. However, yes, of course. Where would be a good place to meet? I don't know. A library? I thought about the clutter on the desks in the library. How about we just do it back in the rectory here? There's a nice big table in there. Sure. Let's let's meet back here in a few minutes. I need to go get my supplies. Flora nodded and skulked off in the direction of the dorms. I hadn't thought about it, but I was going to need access to my old cell. All of my illumination supplies, brushes, paints, ink, were still in there. My heart sank. I started walking towards the Superior's office. I would need her key. Margaret followed. Thank you, Hedvig. I was worried for a minute that we were both going to look like real blackguards. I must admit, I'd forgotten all about it, but I'm happy to help. Likewise. She was hanging around me all morning, and I was struggling to remember why. And I remembered that we'd had a little heart-to-heart last night. Oh my, did you forget all about what happened? Oh no, how could I? Some details just took precedence over others. Right, she grinned. I should go check in on the cellars and make sure Adela and Marta haven't killed each other. Talk to you later, Hedvig. She broke from me at the staircase down the cellars. I continued to the Superior's door and gave a little knock. Oh, Sister Hedvig, is something wrong? Not at all. I need you to unlock my cell. Whatever for? It's a long story. Just say you need your illumination supplies. But I promised Sister Flora that I'd teach her about illuminating manuscripts, and I only just remembered that all of my tools and paints are still in there. Flora, taking an interest in something? Goodness, we can't let this opportunity go to waste. Oh my god, the teenager, she wants to do something productive! Quickly, all hands on deck! Give me just a moment. The door closed. Shortly after, it swung open again, and the Superior emerged carrying her ring of keys. The unmistakable jingle sent a shiver up my spine. We took the stairs, up to the second floor, and continued down the hall. The huge door that had slammed and scared the sisters all witless was to my left. The wind was shaking it gently as something that big could shake at the very least. The walls around us seemed to pulse and vibrate as the door beat against its frame. as if we're in some great behemoth's lungs. As we turned to the right, I remembered the hideous carving Margaret had shown me with a jolt. Perhaps we really were in the presence of some monstrous creature. I thought about warning the Superior about the evil magic circle I had seen, but could find neither the words nor the courage to bring it up. It was so dark down here. I realized just how out of their way the sisters would have had to come to seek my advice as they anchor us. We stopped at the door. I stared at the hagioscope as the Superior looked for the right key. It was a bizarre device. I'd never really looked at it from the outside, but it looked rather cobbled together. The metal frame was wedged into the stone brick, and the little door looked ready to rust right off its hinges. I opened it idly and took a peek inside. My heart sunk as I realized it was impossible to see through into the cell from this side. There was no way that Catherine and I would have ever been able to see each other. Oh, God. Yeah, that's so sad. The hole in the wall was big enough to pass the books I had needed for transcribing through one at a time, but there was a bend in the middle that prevented direct access. It made me realize just how thick these stone walls were, how isolated I had truly been. I spoke into the hatch. Hello? Feeling nostalgic? Oh, here we are. She selected a key and inserted it into the door. The door lodged open. Oh, how embarrassing. What happened? Nothing. I just forget which way some of the doors open here. She stepped inside. With great trepidation, I followed. It was just as it had been left. I took a deep breath. I felt lightheaded. I went to the shelf and procured a wooden box from the bottom. I could hear the ink bottles rattling inside. This is all I need. Hey, up here in the corner, it says Dorms and then Die Hedwig flashing. What is happening? Is this like a glitch in the game? Because I don't have the most updated version. Or is this like on purpose trying to freak me the fuck out? Because it's kind of weird. It's very weird. This is all I needed, thank you. Very well. Shall we? I nodded. I didn't want to spend any longer in this place. I wasn't sure exactly how close the evil symbol was to my cell, but I wanted to put as much distance between it and myself as possible. Or was the symbol doing that? I turned around. It froze. There was something on my bed that should not be there. Ugh. The half-finished copy of Matthew was sitting there. Ah, the one that she threw up on and then threw out the window. Ah, it says violated in the corner. What's happening? What the fuck? I spotted something else you needed. No, just... That isn't where I left this. The book? Are you sure? I'm positive. You must be mistaken. I have the only key for this room. Perhaps you were reading it when Catherine came to collect you and forgot to put it back. That... Hold on. My God, my brother. Okay, well, the stream has to end within half an hour because my brother's going to be here. That's so funny. I'm like, oh God, what's happening with the game? And then in reality, it's like, oh, you now have a time limit. I'm freaking out. It's not possible. I picked the book up and placed it on top of the box I was carrying. What is it? It's the last book I was writing before... Well, I see. Goodness, it's in rough shape. Looks as if it wasn't properly covered in the cart ride up to the Abbey. James's actual crime may have been negligence. Nonetheless, I understand it must have some sentimental value. May I take it? I don't see why not. You can take anything from here as far as I'm concerned. I see no reason why this room should be locked up at all anymore, to tell you the truth. I nodded. I wasn't about to explain that this book appearing on my bed felt like some sort of supernatural threat, like you were violated. At the very least, unfettered access to my old books was a happy outcome. If I could ever brave coming back here again, that is. Okay, back to just upstairs hall. We left the room and travelled back through the halls. Superior left to return to her office, no doubt swamped with clerical work. I stopped off by the dormitory to deposit the bedraggled book in my new sleeping quarters. Flora looked highly irritated when I finally made it back to the rectory. I'd been worrying about the book, my cell, and that vile sigil all the way there, but my fear was quickly pushed out of my mind by Flora's verbal assault. You said you'd be a few minutes. I'm so sorry. I had to go get the Superior to help me unlock the door to my old cell. I lifted up the box of supplies and rattled it gently. Oh, fair enough. Well, I brought some parchment. Oh, good. I would have been very embarrassed if I had to make another trip. Flora shrugged and hopped up the stairs to the door. She had laid out 2 piles of simple paper. I set the box down between them and began unloading my supplies: inks, gold paint, and a few horsehair brushes. I pulled a chair out and sat down. Flora followed suit. Where should we start? That's what I was going to ask you. Well, what's a moment from the Bible you'd like to try illuminating? I always like doing the Annunciation, or that might be a little advanced for me. Oh, well, how about a letter? Just one letter. Have you not seen illuminated letters, Flora? You read the Bible all the time. You're a nun. You know how cool they are. That's going a bit far the other direction, don't you think? Not at all. There's a lot you can do with just one letter. Huh. Okay then. What letter would be good to start with? I suppose T is always useful. Or A. Flora snickered. Sure. Let's go with A then. You don't sound particularly enthused. It's a letter. I rummaged around in my box of supplies and produced 2 hardened charcoal stubs. I handed one to Flora, who raised her eyebrows. Where'd you get these? I'm not sure. They got passed to me through the squint whenever I got new supplies. They're much nicer than the ones I usually have. I didn't know what to say to this, so I ploughed ahead. I took one of the pieces of paper and began to sketch out a square in the top left corner. The paper was rougher and thinner than the parchment I was typically used to. I had only held paper a few times and never marked it. That's not an A. We're just putting the square down so we know where to fit the letter. Oh. She took up the stick of charcoal and hastily drew a square. It was a bit squiggly. All right. One time when I was volunteering at the medieval fair, I actually did this. I taught kids calligraphy and how to write their name in calligraphy. They really liked it. We didn't do any illuminating, but it's just a fond memory of mine. So now what I would do is, well, I wasn't really sure how to verbally describe my process, so instead I began to draw. In a quick swoop, I outlined a large A in my square that touched all edges of the square, but left plenty of room for artistic embellishment. Flora squinted at my page and then attempted to follow suit. I've tried to learn to illuminate. It's really difficult. I have a tough time managing the harmony of all the different elements. Because with a letter, you learn to form the right shape, right? But with illuminating, you can fill that space with whatever you like, and that's a bit overwhelming. It's a good start. Now what? Well, typically, I'll ink the letter first and let it set. I don't do much of the detail work with the charcoal. It's a bit too thick for that. I peered into my supply box, wiggling my fingers. What colour would you like your letter to be? Red? Blue? Why are you talking to me like I'm a weird baby? Am I? Yes. I'm almost 20, right? You don't need to do this performance for everything. I wasn't aware that I was performing. Right, I had forgotten just how good Flora was at getting under my skin. She is a weird baby. My empathy toward her outburst in the Misericorde had overridden my usual distaste to her attitude. Just talk to me normally. This is how I talk to people normally. Come off it. Everything you say is a question, even if you're not actually asking anything. Oh, is that how I come across? We glared at each other for a moment, but Flora eventually started giggling. And just like that. Oh. I laughed too. I couldn't help it. Happily, the tension seemed to have been released. I guess that is how you normally speak. I haven't spoken to many people face to face. Oh, yeah. That makes sense. I feel a bit of an asshole now. That's quite alright. Red or blue? Blue. I passed her the blue and took the red one for myself, and laid out 2 inkwells from the box. I popped the lid of mine open, then procured 2 brushes. Flora was struggling to pull the cork out of her bottle of blue ink. Be careful opening that, she's gonna get covered in ink. She managed to get the cork out, but in doing so, jostled the bottle forward forcefully. A splash of blue ink landed on her sheet of paper. Here, let me... I reached over and picked her page up, curling it and shaking it in an attempt to get some of the ink back into the bottle on the table. I was moderately successful, but there was a blue streak left on the paper. Sorry. It's not a problem. Just be careful. Ink is quite valuable. I said I was sorry! I poured some of my red ink into a well and dipped the brush in. Try and follow the lines with as few strokes as possible. That way, it dries without a messy-looking texture. I tried to demonstrate, but the paper was soaking up more of the ink than I was used to, rendering this lesson a little moot. Hold on. Again with the brother. Okay. I forged ahead anyway, until I had a satisfactory letter A on my page. Flora had been peering over my shoulder as I drew, and left to try on her own page, which I had finished. She immediately put too much ink on her brush, and the beginning of her first line became a messy blob as a result. I could tell that she was rushing this part, but didn't want to frustrate her any further. Not bad. Shall we do some detailing with the gold paint? I could immediately sense Flora perking up. I uncorked the gold and chose a very thin brush. I like to make little patterns, and you can cheat a bit if you focus on drawing on one half like this. You can just copy it on the other side. That's still drawing two very detailed things. I don't think that's much of a cheat. Yeah, same. It's so fucking difficult. Just give it a try. Okay. How do you do that, though? Are those just random lines? I think of them as vines. Huh. That makes sense, I guess. That's a good start. Keep filling it in. I sat and watched her fill in the square with gold lines. No patterns ever really came together, and I could tell that she wasn't enjoying herself. I tried to avoid staring. I knew that I wouldn't appreciate having my shoulder looked over in my cell, and Flora was liable to bite my head off if I did anything that could be interpreted as condescending. Ah. So what got you interested in art? I don't know. Did Catherine draw much? A bit. And she was going to teach you at one point? Before? Yup. What sort of things did she paint? Lots. Anything you particularly liked? Sure. That was this one she showed me that I really liked. Oh? Yeah, it was her holding some guy's head. What? It was so awesome. Whose head was it? Whoa, hold on, what is this? What does this mean? No idea. Goodness. Was it the bloody King of England? It was probably Holofernes, though. Yeah, that makes sense. It does sound like she was just like referencing Judith beheading Holofernes and just put herself in the Judith position. I breathed a little internal sigh of relief. Of course. Do you like that story? Yeah, it's awesome. Judith is a very interesting book. Have you read the whole thing? No, just the gory parts. I resisted the urge to bang my own head against the table. But you know the general thrust of it, yes? Yeah, she pretends to be friends with Holofernes and then cuts his head off. Do you know why she cuts his head off? He was a bit of an asshole. How's your drawing coming along? Yeah, I know, friends. I could hear that my voice was a bit pitchier than normal. Flora leaned back in a chair and adjusted at her paper. That's a great first attempt. It was sloppy, but honestly, it wasn't so bad. I certainly had done worse when I was first starting out. And you can definitely tell that's the letter A. That still feels a bit empty. You could add something to one of the corners, maybe. Like what? What about a crucifix? Boring. The crucifix is not boring. We're nuns. It's 2 lines. I'm not being blasphemous. I just mean, it's not exciting drawing. I don't know then. You could do one of those Celtic crosses. Them things fuck. A bird? Or a cat? Oh, that's a fine idea. Flora leaned forward in her seat again, looking very engaged all of a sudden. Yes! Draw a kitty! Best solution to any art block. Just draw a kitty. Yeah, can you draw a cat? I don't think I've ever tried. How about we both try one separate from the illuminated letters and compare? Sure. We both started sketching with our charcoal on our own papers. I tried to remember what cats looked like. I found them cute, despite their reputations. I soon realized that I'd only ever seen the one scampering out of the kitchen. I actually don't know if I've ever seen a cat up close, now that I think about it. Really? Really, I just know of them, mostly. There are lions and leopards and so on in the Bible, but you never saw one before you became a nun. That was so long ago, I could scarcely remember if I had. So you weren't born here, then? No. Where do you come from, then? Thank you, Flora. Trier. Hedwig von Trier? Oh my god. Wow, I would never have guessed that from your accent. You sound very English. That's so cool. I have been here most of my life. Yeah, but you're twice as old as I am. Some people's accents stick even when they move. Like Adela. Moira and Catherine, too. Hey, first of all, I'm not that much older than you. Don't remember much from before you moved. How long ago was it? Almost 20 years ago. Wow. So you were in there for as long as I've been alive. Yes. So you were like 20 before you moved and you still lost your accent. I would have been about 5 or 6, thank you very much. Oh my god! They put a 6-year-old in the hole! Oh. Or, well, 7 or 8 or 9 maybe? It would be funny if you brought the accent back for a day or two. Just confuse everyone for a bit. Hello, my name is Hedwig. Something like that. I smacked the charcoal down in exasperation. My cat drawing as finished as it was ever going to get. Let's compare our drawings now, shall we? Oh my god! Oh my god! What if it's just the Hedwig? No, the flashing message was not the Simpsons joke of it says the Bart, the... This fucking cat! That is not what a cat looks like. I tried my best. It's got a human nose. Ah! He can never get the faces right. Is that what a cat looks like? It's closer than yours. Yours has a very human face. So does yours. Whatever. Okay. We're gonna stop here. Not only because my brother is gonna come over and we have to fill out a bunch of stupid bank forms, but because nothing can top this. Nothing can top hello, my Name is Hedwig, followed by this. The Hedwig, the... Okay. You never get the faces right. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for another wonderful Nun Day. Sorry this one was cut a little bit short, but we really packed some punches in there today. My absolute galaxy brain take of Catherine is still alive in the mastermind has expanded to become even more insane, and I cannot wait to unravel that further. We've learnt a lot more about Catherine herself, about her mega ADHD brain, and her very flash in the pan, intense, and then receding relationships with what seems like all of the nuns. We have seen some immaculate illuminations. And so that is going to be it for today. I will see you all next time. The VODs will be up on my YouTube channel, and keep your eye on my socials for announcements when the next one will be. Hopefully, you can get back to weekly. See you guys.